Alrighty, so for the first time this season, we do have a lot of games that's going to be happening in the middle of the week. In fact, 10 games that's going to be happening in the middle of the week. And I've said before that, the league, they have tried their best in terms of eliminating these kind of situation where there tends to be a lot of games that's happening in the middle of the week. I mean, it's not just because the ratings and also the attendance tends to be really bad for midweek games, but also fixture congestion is the reason why the league have been getting rid of these midweek games. I mean, I remember back in 2020 when we had that pandemic shortened season of how it seems like we always kind of have midweek games, especially in the back end of the schedule because of how short the season got, and that the league trying to get every single game in a very short amount of period. Well, again, the league is trying not to do that again, at least for this season. Though, again, this year, it's kind of weird they decided to set these midweek games like right now. Consider a lot of teams are actually facing fixture congestion with the way that they have to play a midweek U.S. Open Cup game, and then they have to play a weekend game, and that a lot of teams played last week in the U.S. Open Cup, then play the weekend game, and now they have a short turnaround to play these midweek games, then got a weekend game, and then of course some teams that have advanced to the round of 16, they will have another midweek game. So yeah, I mean, for some of these teams, unfortunately, fixture congestion is going to be a thing, and in some way, they're probably just laughing at the league and saying, yeah, you remember how you said that you're not putting a lot of these midweek games because you're fixing fixture congestion? Why the heck are we still getting like 7 games in a span of four weeks, or 7 games in a span of months? Like, that just did not really solve the issue of what they were trying to do, which again is to fix the amount of games that these players will have to endure in a short amount of period. But that being said, let us actually get into the first game, which is DC United versus NYCFC, and this will be the first of 3 games that's going to be starting at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. And the other thing I do not like about midweek games is that, they're all kind of bunch up to each other, especially with the East Coast game, as we're going to have 7 games that's going to be happening at the same time around that busy time period, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, all the way to 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. But coming into this game between DC versus NYCFC, NYCFC has the all-time edge with a 9-3-5 record. And the last 3 head-to-head matchup, yeah, DC fans would not want to remember the last time they faced NYCFC. They got smoked 6-0 by NYCFC in the last game, before NYCFC winning 2-1 against DC. Though DC did return the favorite and win 2-1 against NYCFC. And, coming into this game, obviously NYCFC will be the favorite. But for DC, I feel like they're in the same projectile as what the Quakes are dealing with right now, where, both of these teams fired their head coach very early in the season for almost the same reason. But there's a slight difference, and now ever since they're under an interim head coach, they have done much better and got themselves back into the playoff race. So yeah, for DC, this is a game where, while they are going to really have to be at their best in terms of defending, because we know this NYCFC team is capable of scoring, and even though in the last couple of games they haven't been a free scoring team as we've seen before, if they can figure out their clinical finishing problem that they had in the last 2 games, they can easily put a crooked number on the board, even if they're going to be playing on the road. So yeah, it should be a very interesting game to see. But moving on, in terms of the next match, we're going to talk about the other New York team, the New York Red Bulls versus the Chicago Fires, as the Red Bulls have a 5-4-2 record and the Fire has a 2-4-5 record. And this is also a game where we find out whether or not indeed the Red Bulls can finally getting their first ever home win. And again, it is still weird, the fact that this team, for whatever reason, cannot win at home, but when they go on the road, they look like the best team in the league, and it's not even close. But all-time meeting, Chicago does have a 32, 13, and 23 meeting. By the way, this is also the second meeting between both of these teams, and that the last time they faced against each other, we remember how crazy that game was, where it, actually, I wouldn't say crazy is the word, but more like it was a very shithousery kind of CCL game where there was like a long weather delay, and then the pitch basically was completely waterlogged, and it felt like it was watching a CCL game. And then there was also some controversial referee decision, and the referee decided that he was very trigger happy with the yellow card and also the red card, because the Fire actually went down to 9 men in that game and lost 2-1 to the Red Bulls. But before that, the Fire did win 1-0 on the road against the Red Bulls before the Fire win 2-1 against the New York Red Bulls. And again, for the Red Bulls, this is the best opportunity for them to get a win at home, because they're facing a struggling Chicago Fire team that, yeah, they have really fall apart ever since they had some defensive problem, and not to mention they also been having problem in terms of scoring too, because I don't remember the last time they scored more than a goal in the game. Well, actually, the last time I think they did was against Sporting KC, but that felt like it was ages ago, and that they just have not been on a good run because of not just problem with scoring, but also now problem with defending too. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, we got the Philadelphia Union versus Inter Miami. So speaking of a team that is also struggling, and a team that I think not a lot of people realize that they are actually struggling as much as it is, because you look at the Union, they technically still have only lost one game this season, but the problem is they've also have not won a game in 5. In fact, they have come off with now 4 consecutive draws, and if you're a Union fan, that has to be very frustrating. I mean, no, they're not only unable to win now, but they're also dropping points at home, and at home is where they're supposed to be strongest. Now they're playing against an Inter Miami team that, again, this season for Inter Miami, it's been kind of very, very typical of them. They go on a good run, and then they go on a bad run, and now they're on the verge of a bad run. But the thing about Inter Miami is that they were one of the last teams that was able to beat the Philadelphia Union on the road, because as we'll talk about the record, where the Union has a 5-5-1 record, and Inter Miami have a 3-2-6 record, and the Union have a 2-1-1 record. The last head-to-head meeting, Miami of course drew 1-1 against the Union, but Miami actually won 2-1 against the Philadelphia Union and become one of the rare teams that is able to go to Subaru Park and get all 3 points. I mean, Subaru Park is, as I mentioned, one of the toughest places to get wins. Though lately it doesn't seem like it's the toughest place to get draws, because I've seen a lot of teams have been able to get at least a point after, or at least a point out of that stadium. But again, it is still a stadium that is really hard to get 3 points at. But Inter Miami has already done it. But the first ever meeting, unsurprisingly, the Union were able to win 3-0 against Inter Miami. And for the Union, the problem for them so far is really just kind of goal scoring, and also the fact that, how I talk about this Union team, and one of the things that I credit this team when they were in first place for a long time to begin the season, is that they play a very Jim Curtin style of play, where this is a team that is not going to impress you, but they work hard and they kind of grind out games and able to get wins. But unfortunately, that just haven't worked out. I mean, they still do the same style, but still they're not able to kind of grind out games and score a crucial goal to basically close out the game, as we've seen before. I mean, in the last game they'll be very frustrated that they probably could have got all 3 points if it wasn't for the disallowed goal, which again I said that was correctly called. But yeah, for the Union, they need to figure something out, and especially on the attacking end too. I mean, that's really kind of what's holding back this team, because we know this team is one of the best defensive team in the league, and they can definitely grind out reserve. But as I said before, with teams that struggle to score goals, if you do that, you're not going to win a lot of games, no matter how good your defense is. But moving on, in terms of the next match, speaking of a team that is struggling to score a goal, that team is Minnesota. And they, of course, unsurprisingly come off of a loss against the Seattle Sounders, a team that they don't do well. And their reward for this midweek game is playing against another team that they don't do well, which is the LA Galaxy. Now, I will say this, at least in the last 2 games, Minnesota has definitely played much better against the Galaxy as what we've seen in this meeting. In fact, they finally got their first win against the Galaxy, finally broke that curse last season. And then this, of course, is also a rematch of that crazy decision day game between them and the Galaxy, where that was a game that will always known as the game where Greg Vanney decided to realize that his team still need 1 goal to win the game because of other circumstances, and they didn't get that goal and end up missing out on the playoffs on decision day once again. Now, coming into this game, Minnesota have a 4-2-5 record, and it has, these last couple of games, it's been a disastrous class. Like, they went from a team that looked like they were comfortable in playoff position to now all of a sudden finding themselves 10th in the Western Conference. Whereas for the Galaxy, you know, it's not any better for them. I mean, yes, they are still above the playoff line right now, but I gave warning signs of this Galaxy team of the way that they're not scoring goals, and that in the last game it was proven again, where as soon as they went down 3-0 at home, you knew the game was over, because you know that this is a team that is not known to come back, and it's been having some problem in terms of goal scoring, and surprisingly that of course was the case, as their record is now at 6-1-4. This game will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. Like I mentioned, the Galaxy pretty much dominate this series 6-3-1, but at least in the last 3 head-to-head matchup, it was a free draw between both of these teams before Minnesota finally winning their first game against the Galaxy at home in the last meeting 3-0. But before that, it was a 1-0 loss that Minnesota has against the Galaxy. And that game, Minnesota should have won. I mean, that was the game that I remember they had just boatloads of chances, and the Galaxy got one lucky attack, and they were able to take advantage of it. And of all people that got the goal on a rare transitional attack was Kevin Cabral, who is a guy that has been just ridiculed by Galaxy fans in these last couple of games, or not just the last couple of games, but this entire season with how poor he's been. But yeah, you know, for Minnesota, I mean, if there is a way to bounce back from a tough result against Seattle, this is definitely one of them. And you know, for the Galaxy, unless they can't get Chicharito going again, which, you know, that's another issue that this team has. Chicharito has now gone, I think, 6 games without scoring a goals, and if they don't get him going again, this team could be going through the same thing we saw last season when they got in that incredibly bad run in the second half of the season. And it feels like this year it's almost the same, but at least it's now happening earlier than what we saw last season. But now moving on to the next match, we got the Houston Dynamo versus the Seattle Sounders, as this game will be actually the first of 3 games that will start at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time. Again, a lot of 7:38 p.m. local time kickoff. In fact, I think there's only 2 games, this one and then the one between Vancouver and Dallas does not start at 7:38 p.m. local time. So again, I'm going to just keep it short in terms of talk about what the kickoff of it, because it's pretty pretty similar to a lot of these midweek games that we usually see. Now, coming into this game for the Dynamo, they have a 4-3-4 record, and Seattle have a 3-1-5 record. And even though Seattle is still a couple of points away from being above the red line, when you look at their points per game tally, it's actually higher than the team that is currently at the last spot of the playoffs, and that, you know, they can win those games in hand, because, you know, they had a couple of games that was postponed it because MLS really want them to be the first team to win CCL, which eventually it did happen. So yeah, they definitely still have the edge, and that, again, I don't think that that's something that they're going to be worried about, because, you know, the last game when they play against Minnesota, although they didn't play well in that one, it's a sign to show that, yeah, the Seattle Sounders is ready for your typical second half resurgence like we always see from them. And, you know, they will try to continue that against a Dynamo team that, you know, they got a big victory last game against Nashville SC and able to improve their record to 4-3-4. But all-time meeting, Seattle has dominated this series 13-7-6. And the last 3 head-to-head meeting, believe it or not, the Dynamo actually got a 2-1 win against the Sounders before the Sounders did win 2-0 against Houston. And then Seattle, of course, winning 1-0 against the Houston Dynamo. Now, one thing that is going to be a problem for the Sounders coming in this game, and I should have said the same thing about Minnesota, is that they're the 2 only team that play on Sunday that have a very short turnaround to play on a Wednesday night. But at least for Minnesota, they get to play at home, which, you know, maybe that, of course, does help, because Allianz Field, I mean, I don't want to say Allianz Field has been a fortress this season, because I think they've already lost twice this year, but you know, it is still a stadium that I feel the more confident whenever Minnesota play, compared to, you know, when they play on the road, where it's always an automatic loss. And that goes the same for the Houston Dynamo too. I mean, I feel like Dynamo fans will feel more comfortable when they're playing at home compared to play on the road, because the Dynamo is basically the definition of a team that struggle on the road. But again, if they want to get another home win, they have to face against a team that is trying to ignite their usual second half resurgence to charge up the table, and we'll see whether or not if that's going to be the case, and also whether or not if the Sounders maybe will rest some of the guys too, because that game against Minnesota, yes, they of course get the win, but it was a hard fought game too. So to able to recover quickly to ready for the next game in a couple of days after a hard fought victory is definitely not going to be easy. But if there's one team that can do it, it's definitely the Seattle Sounders. But now moving on in terms of the next match is Sporting KC versus the Colorado Rapids. So this probably is one, if not the most important game for Sporting KC this season, because I know right now there's been a lot of talks of rebuild, and there's even some talks of the fact that Peter Vermes is definitely on the hot seat after that embarrassing performance against the Portland Timbers in the last one. That old saying that when you have a tough loss and especially an embarrassing loss, the only way to try to bounce back is to get a win in the very next game. And the good news for Sporting KC is that after that embarrassing loss, at least they can get to play at home again, which for this season, just like their home form has not been very good, but at least they get to play against a Colorado Rapids team that the Rapids they definitely made a big statement in the last game, beating LAFC at home, but we'll see whether or not if they're going to have a letdown coming out of this game, because it's easy to have a letdown when you get a statement win at home and have a short turnaround to go on the road, and especially the Rapids this season. They're not a very good road team. Like, they're starting to get back to the Rapids that we've seen before. Like, last season, it was kind of an exception because they really got the reason why they were able to get to first place in the West is them not losing a home game except for one that they had, and also they were actually strong on the road, which was very unlike the Colorado Rapids. But they're starting to see that becoming that again with them having problems on the road, and against an SKC team that, again, they're desperate in terms of trying to have a bounce back. Like, all these players, they admit that it was an embarrassing performance. In fact, Johnny Russell after the game even said it in the press. He felt absolutely embarrassed as an individual and even as a team as a whole, the fact that they lost 7-2 against the Timbers. So we'll see whether they can bounce back. But in terms of the all-time meeting, Sporting KC does have the advantage, 34-20 and 27. In the last free head-to-head meeting, the Rapids did win 2-0 against Sporting KC, but it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams, and then it was a 0-0 draw against Sporting KC. And draw is definitely not going to be something that will satisfy this SKC faithful. That will definitely might be chanting the Vermes out chant. I mean, can you imagine if that crowd actually started to chant the Vermes out after all these years we talk about how that fan base really loved Peter Vermes? I mean, that's just kind of how it is in terms of the modern day of MLS. Like, it doesn't matter you're a club legend, and it doesn't matter the fact that you have got so much success to the Sporting KC team, which Peter Vermes have definitely done. It's all about what have you done with me? Like, what have you done for me lately? And what has Peter Vermes done to this Sporting KC is just absolutely running this team to the ground. And that, again, we might see the unthinkable, where maybe Sporting KC might think about moving on from Peter Vermes and heading to a new direction. But that being said, I am now going to switch sports and look at the last 4 games that's going to be happening in terms of the midweek action. But moving on, in terms of the next game, is Nashville and Montreal. So, for Nashville, just like what I said for Sporting KC, their weekend game was definitely not a good one when they lost 2-0 against a Houston Dynamo team that were down to 10 men for a long time. And unfortunately, unlike Sporting KC, well, actually, the good news is at least they're playing at home, but unfortunately, they get a much tougher opponent, because their opponent that they're about to face is literally the hottest team right now in the league, that is Montreal, who have a 6-2-3 record, leading the Eastern Conference against a Nashville team that have a 4-3-4 record. And I believe Nashville is the team that is currently in the last spot in the Western Conference. As this game, of course, as I mentioned, will start at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time. Also, the first ever night game at Geo this part in MLS play, because I kind of want to just mention that because previously it's been all day game in terms of MLS action, and that they actually didn't have their first night game at that stadium until the U.S. Open Cup. But this is the first official night game that's going to be taking place there. And I already watched a game that is at nighttime on TV, and it definitely looks just as spectacular at nighttime than it is at daytime. I've already seen them play at the new stadium. But in terms of the all-time meeting, Nashville have a 2-2-0 record over Montreal, so they actually have never lost to Montreal, which maybe that will give them some confidence facing against a team that has a long unbeaten run. And in terms of the last 3 head-to-head meeting, it was Nashville winning 1-0 against Montreal. Before it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams, and then a 2-2 draw against Montreal. In fact, last year, Montreal, they came close a couple of times to get a win, and I remember in this one, they had a 2-0 lead, and then they blew it, and then they play Nashville again, and I think they had a 1-0 lead until Nashville was able to pull one back late in the game. I mean, that's what Nashville do. Like, this is a team that, I know this season they finally started to these kind of games where they kind of fall behind and trying to come back kind of start to really take a toll of this team, because last season it feels like every time when they went down, you expect that Nashville would come back. But this is still a team that shows resilient, and that for Montreal, as hot as they are right now, the old saying, all things have to come to an end, and I don't want to just jinx Montreal that this is going to be the game to do so. In fact, I probably shouldn't have said that, because I probably now just jinxed them coming into this one. But it's not going to be easy for this one to go into Nashville, and Nashville trying to establish this park as a fortress, and are trying to also start a good run leading up to the end of the season, because with them going through a long road stretch, they want to start winning some of these home games to really now get back to the place that I predicted that they're going to be in, which is first place in the Western Conference, which, yeah, it doesn't seem like that's going to be lively, at least with the way that they are playing, but you never know. They are going to make Geodis Park a fortress and maybe win a couple more road games. They can definitely get themselves in first place in the Western Conference, though it's going to take a lot, because they're actually a long way back in terms of the top spot in the West right now. But moving on, in terms of the next match, one team that is not that far from the top of the West, and this is something that I don't think a lot of people have realized, but FC Dallas is only 1 point from LAFC at the top of the Western Conference. A team that literally I think is probably the biggest sleeper right now, because I know a lot of people have talked about the feel-good story of Montreal doing well, and also FC Cincinnati. But what about FC Dallas and Nico Estevez? This team have only lost once this season. Like, the way that they played this season, doesn't feel like they have lost once this year, but that's kind of is the case. And that one loss was against New England on the road. And in fact, Dallas would have been at the top of the Western Conference if they didn't blow that 2-0 lead against Sporting KC on the road. But nevertheless, they have a 6-4-1 record, and they're facing against the Vancouver Whitecaps. That the Whitecaps is basically one of the most cursed teams this season. Like, no matter what they do, I mean, I know I've said the Whitecaps has been bad this season, but some of them has been because of bad luck, and that in the last game, it was just kind of a game when they were playing against the Quakes. Not only in a game that I should have also known that was the third wheel derby, but also a game that both defense decided that, yeah, we're not gonna show up for the last 45 minutes of the game. We're basically just going to maybe they were kind of just more focused on the next game rather than just kind of play the last 45 minutes, and that game turns out to be bananas. But coming to this one, it is a 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific kickoff, or 7 p.m. Pacific start, and the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. Vancouver have a 2-2-6 record, while Dallas have a 6-4-1 record, as I mentioned. All-time meeting, Dallas does lead the all-time meeting slightly 11-7-7 over Vancouver, but the last three head-to-head meeting, the Whitecaps did win 1-0 against Dallas. Then it was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams, and then another 2-2 draw between both of these teams. So yeah, again, this is a match that Dallas is going to be the heavy favorites, and especially this season, I think one of the reasons why Dallas have really got themselves at the top of the standings isn't just because of the fact that they finally got some of signings that they haven't got it right in the off season, and not just heavily rely on their academy to get them to the top. But it's also because of the road form that they've been much better this season on the road. But we'll see whether or not if that's going to continue in this game against the Vancouver Whitecaps. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is LAFC versus Austin FC. So ever since I made that video about Austin FC, you know, they've already lost one time, and it's going to be interesting to see that as Austin go through this murderous road. I'm just going to keep track of how many losses that they will suffer ever since I made that video talk about whether if Austin good start is actually real, or is it actually just fool's goal, and that now they're getting fined out when they do play against real team. Because in the last one, you know, a game where they can maybe prove some doubter wrong, well, unfortunately, they proved doubters right again by losing to RSL. And now they get to play against LAFC, a team that they have never won before. And you know, this game, of course, will start at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time. LAFC have a 7-2-2 record, while Austin have a 6-2-3 record. And as I mentioned, LAFC have a 3-0-0 record over Austin. In those three meetings, it was a 2-1 win that LAFC had against Austin, a 2-0 win against Austin on the road, and then another 2-0 win in the game that, you know, Austin fans will definitely remember that one as their first ever game in franchise history, but they'll definitely don't want to talk about the result of how they weren't able to get anything out of that game. Though I will say that, you know, for most expansion team, when they play their first game, most of them are always going to be end up on the losing side. So I would say Austin fans will always remember that moment when they finally have the chance to see their team play in a competitive match and officially play their first ever game in MLS history. But, you know, for this game for Austin, you would say that if they can get a win against LAFC, and you know for LAFC, this game, as much as they know that they have a good history against Austin, they can't take Austin lightly in this one. And I feel like maybe they kind of did that against the Colorado Rapids, and that's why they lost that one badly, because, you know, they really kind of got outplayed in that one. So to not repeat the same mistake, I think Steve Chernow is going to try his best to motivate his team and trying to get this team do well. And the other thing I think that he might maybe need to start thinking about his team to do better is they need to be better in the first half. I mean, I know, yes, they are a second half team, and I mentioned before, when you're a second half team, you're still going to get a lot of victory because you're always going to finish games strong. But as we saw in the last game against the Rapids, like, what happens if you do go behind? And that, I know I've seen before where LAFC has been able to come back, but you can only fall behind and not play well for the first half for a very long time before it's going to hinder the play in the second half. And we definitely saw in that game against Colorado where they just never got going in the second half. So it's important for LAFC to establish a lead in this one, and if they can do that, then I expect they should get all 3 points against Austin. But, you know, this is an Austin team. Like, this Austin team is on a mission to try to prove those doubters wrong, and if they can get a result out of this one, this will definitely be the statement win, and the win that they can really finally pound on their chest and say, see, we told you we're not fools. Go. We can actually face against the best team in the league. But now moving on, in terms of the last match, is the San Jose Earthquakes versus the Portland Timbers. Now, before I talk about this game, I'm actually going to go to this game, which means that I do apologize to the Quakes fan base that, yeah, I am indeed attending this one, because you know what that means, right? When I'm attending a Quakes game, that means they're not gonna win this one. I mean, it's been proven correctly, because literally I've only been to one Quakes home game this season, and that's the only the game that they have lost so far this season at home in league play. And also, before you trying to kind of maybe create a shield to prevent me to go, I'm gonna find my way to get into the stadium. I mean, I know I probably shouldn't fight through it, but, you know, I do miss going to two Quakes home games, and that, you know, I've only been to one, and then the other one was really just a Sports Hop series I did where I don't know if that counts as one. And maybe you can say that maybe if you do count it, that kind of maybe is not finally the game that ended the curse, because, you know, I haven't seen the Quakes win at home in a very long time, and that was finally the one that they did when they won 5-0 against Bay City. But let's be honest, we knew that they were going to win that one, and that, again, the curse of league plays of me when I go to Quakes game still it is there, and that, you know, I mean, as much as I always apologize about me going there and that they're not going to lose, maybe this might be finally the game that the curse will end. Though if that's going to happen, you know, they're going to have to face against a Timbers side that, you know, they're coming off of a red hot game where they won 7-2 against Sporting KC. But if there's one thing that I mentioned before, is that just because the team coming off of a red hot game and are able to put a big amount of goals number against the opposition, it doesn't mean that that's going to transition in the next game. And especially in a short turnaround like this, you know how I said that, you know, when a team get a big win and there could be a potential letdown, that could be the same case for the Portland Timbers. I mean, you know, they got to stay sharp coming into this one, because they know that this Quakes team this season, and at least now under Alex Carvalho, this team have definitely played like a playoff team. Now, as I said, I don't think this is going to be a playoff team, because I think the reason why they've been playing like a playoff team is because of that new coaching kind of boost, and that I do still see many problems with this Quakes team, especially the defense. And, you know, if the Timbers are going to put out their strongest team coming into this game, I do fear about that this defense is going to really have a rough night in this one. But, you know, if there's one thing that at least I'm a little confident, is that, you know, at least the offense is going, and that I expect maybe this game could be like what seen with Quakes game before, where, yeah, expect this could be like a very high scoring matchup, just like what we saw between them and the Vancouver Whitecaps. Now, coming into this one, as I mentioned, the Quakes have a 2-4-5 record, while the Timbers have a 3-6-3 record. This game will start at the same time as the one between LAFC versus Austin. And the all-time meeting, you know, again, the Timbers absolutely dominate the Quakes in the all-time meeting, 17-9-5. And a lot of that because of the fact that the Timbers have never lost to the Quakes at Providence Park, and that even, I think lately we also have started to see the Quakes. I mean, I remember the Quakes used to do very well against the Portland Timbers at home. That's just not been the case. In fact, I think the Timbers is now the team that the Quakes are having problem in terms of getting wins. I mean, before I know it was the Seattle Sounders, the one that they had trouble getting wins, and it seems like they kind of ended that curse a little bit with them already beating the Sounder twice, one in US Open Cup and then one in league play in a controversial way. But now it seems like it just kind of developed a new curse, where it's now from one Cascadia team that the Quakes can't beat to now another Cascadia team that they can't beat. And it's been shown in the last 3 head-to-head matchup where the Timbers did win 2-0 against the Quakes, but they did get a rare 1-1 draw against the Timbers, and that was like really the first point they ever had against the Timbers at Providence Park since what, like 2012 or 2011 or something like that. And then before that, they lost 2-0 against the Timbers, and I definitely don't want to remember that game, because that was the game when the Quakes basically embarrassed themselves by losing to a Timbers team that not only wasn't even starting the strongest team, but we're playing a 4th straight goalkeeper, and they can't solve him there. So, yeah, again, hopefully this is finally the game that ends the curse, but if it is not, I do apologize to Quakes fans in advance that this could potentially be the second home loss that they saw for this season. And you know, again, this is also the reason why I haven't attended a lot of Quakes game too. Maybe the Quakes fans should thank me, the fact that I haven't attended a lot of Quakes game this year, with the way that, you know, it seems like when I'm not there, they're able to perform much better, but when I'm there, it seems like they're going to collapse itself, and that it seems like maybe that could be the case, or maybe it could reverse coming into this one. But either way, that is pretty much it for the preview of all 10 of these games. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all of these games, and as always, let me know in the comments below your prediction for all 10 of these games that's going to be happening in the middle of the week. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.